My daughter is frightened of ghosts, and I have been constantly helping her to get over this problem, but it has been a struggle. The trials a child must go through in life, and all of the fears, anxiety and trepidation they must face is daunting. As a responsible parent, I have been doing my best to show my daughter that ghosts don't exist, and I have taken many steps to assure her this fact. I myself used to be scared of ghosts as a child, but my father helped me through it, and I will do the same for my own daughter. In our family, there is a tradition that we do when one member is scared of ghosts, and I called all of the extended family and neighborhood friends to come to my house. The main event was going to be about my daughter realizing that ghosts don't exist, and it will be nice for everyone to be together, as it has been a long time. My daughter was terrified and even more anxious as she was going to be the main attraction. But I told her that after the event, she will no longer be scared of ghosts. Then, when the day arrived, and all of the guests gathered around the house, with a man tied up to a chair, my daughter was in the middle. The man tied up to the chair was killed, and as he died, I told my daughter, "Observe this man dying body. Is there any spirit coming out of him?" And my daughter just stared at him with wide eyes. For hours we all just stared at a dead body, as we were all witnessing no kind of spirit coming from the man's body. This was a lesson for my daughter, and a reminder to everyone else in the room, that ghosts or spirits don't exist. Then, a few weeks later, my daughter got scared again, and killed our cat. She looked at me and said, "Just wanted to remind myself that ghosts and spirits don't exist." "Do you think ghosts are real?" the man asked. The girl was lying in bed with a sheet pulled up over her head. I really wish he would be quiet, she thought. She hated scary stories about things that went bump in the dark. "I think they are," the man continued. "I think after we die, we can choose to come back." The girl clutched her teddy tight against her chest. "Please just be quiet." "But what kind of a person would do that? Come back from the dead, I mean. Do you think they would be good or bad?" She squeezed her eyelids together and tightened her mouth. "Why is it important? Why can't you just leave the question unasked?" "Personally, I'd say they were bad. Think about it. If they were good, there'd be stories like grandmother's spirit saves family from car accident, or man who died in forest helps lost child find their way out." Thunder boomed beyond the window to the right-hand side of the girl's bed, sending a shiver along her spine. "I don't care whether they're good or bad. I just want you to stop talking." Heavy rain began pelting the glass. "But those aren't the kind of stories you hear about, are they? The ones you hear about are always frightening specters who met bitter ends haunting creepy old buildings or dark tunnels." He was silent for a moment, then added, "That sure doesn't sound like something a good person would do to me." The fine hairs on the back of the girl's neck stood on end. "I don't want to hear anymore." "But then you've got to wonder, if they're not good people, then why are they here? What have they come back for?" Floorboards creaked around the room as the man traveled around. "Maybe they're sad, or filled with regret." The creaking came to a halt alongside the bed. "Or perhaps they're angry about how they died and want to make others suffer, like they did." The mattress sunk to one side as the man sat down. To keep herself from sliding into the dip, the girl pulled her trembling knees into her chest and scooted back. She didn't dare expose herself to the world outside the blanket. Please, please, can't you stop talking? Please just stop. Her eyes welled up with tears.
But you still haven't answered my original question.
The man leaned forward. Now the girl could sense his head hovering inches above hers.
Do you think ghosts are real?
The girl's body tensed hard. With a frail, trembling voice, she said,
I don't know.
4 pale fingers reached beneath the top of the sheet.
Would you like to find out?
I hate going to cemeteries. It's not that, it's the atmosphere, the strange peacefulness washing over countless graves. The neglected tombs, or the newly buried. No, it's not even zombies, if they exist. Or even the distant ringing of the church bell. It's just that I happen to have a strange gift. I can hear the dead. And it's not only that. They can hear me too. I sigh as I get out of the car, grab the flowers. The sun's bright as ever. I lock the car, and I begin my walk to my destination. The graves lined row by row. Some old, dating back centuries, others modern. Most are stones and crosses. A few are newly made. Then I hear them. The grave on my right, Meta Anna Hobbs, 1900 to 1918.
I'm sorry, Mama and Papa. I should have listened.
The grave on my left, MP Jackson, 1890 to 1951.
I killed myself after what I did to little Charlie.
More voices come. It got annoying. Like what happens when a lot of radio frequencies merged into one. I pause at one grave. It read, Baby Ellie, 2004. Our little angel. A baby's wail. A teddy bear and a small bouquet. I then look at the other. Ren Rightwell, 1990 to 2017. I can hear Ren's whisper.
I know who killed me. He's right there.
I rub my temple and move on. As I do, I see the more interesting graves. I have at least 2 favorites. One grave has a mortsafe over it, probably to keep off vampires or something. I read the old, eroded stone marker as best I can. Arthur Patton Smith, 18-something to 1889. Here lies the man. He who cares, may he rest. Reading, I can hear his voice.
God loves us all except the colored folk.
I quickly back away, then I finally spot it. The flying angel grave by the pine tree. Mom. 59 steps later, I get there. I face the angel. I give a moment of silence and read Mom's tomb, the words etched below the angel. Marianne Canal, 1956 to 2020. Beloved wife, mother and grandmother. Her memory is enshrined in our hearts. While standing there, I feel numb. My fingers grip the bouquet tight. I remember Mom, a sweet woman. Her smile, her strong hands, and witty humor. After several minutes, I gather the courage to speak to her. How's it going, Mom? I feel strong emotions coming. Mom's voice answered me in return.
You brat. I took care of you and your brother. I gave you your own closet. But you scratched it like a cat. You didn't know how to wash in the tub, so I showed you how.
I laugh at the whisper. You're telling a different story, Mom. At least you won't hurt me or Hector anymore. Moonlight shone through the window, bathing the room in white light. Ben lay awake in his bed, unable to sleep. His mind raced with thoughts that made him feel uneasy. Was he really hearing his dead sister's voice, coming from inside of the wardrobe? Or was it all in his head? He could not tell anymore. He had been hearing her voice for over a week now, never having the courage to actually check the wardrobe. All he did was stare at it as he lay there terrified. His mother grew concerned, and when she tried to speak to him about it, he just replied, "I'm fine." Ben didn't want to mention that he was hearing Julia's voice from the wardrobe. No, he hated to see his mother cry. He remembered all too well how grief-stricken she had been when she heard that Julia had died in a hit and run. He wasn't going to put her through more stress. In order to convince himself that it was all just in his head, he decided that he would look inside the wardrobe tonight. He will prove that it is just his grief and not actually his sister who he missed so much. Night came, and as Ben lay in his bed, that familiar voice returned, coming from the wardrobe.
"Hello, Ben. I miss you. When are you going to talk to me? Being dead is lonely."
He got up from his bed and went over to the wardrobe cautiously. As he reached for the wardrobe handle, he heard her speak once again.
"No point in opening the wardrobe. You won't see me. I'm where the dead kids go."
That last part sent shivers up Ben's spine. It chilled him to his core. He opened the wardrobe doors quickly, revealing nothing. Nobody was inside. "Told you," his sister's voice said, coming from inside the emptiness of the wardrobe. Ben jumped back at her voice. He tried, but failed to regain his composure. A timid reply left his lips. "Julia, is it really you?"
"Of course, it is. Who else would it be?"
His sister's voice replied. "Where are you?"
"I told you, silly. I am where the dead kids go."
"But where is that?" Ben asked, trying to control his whole body shaking with fright.
"I don't know, but it's very cold and dark."
"Are you alone there, wherever you are?"
"I don't think so. I sometimes hear others, but it's too dark to see anything."
Tears flooded Ben's eyes. His thoughts raced with a storm of memories. His sister's smiling face, her joyful laughter as they played together. Dark thoughts mixed with the happy ones. He saw Julia alone, in a dark and lonely place, crying for help. Wasn't it a big brother's duty to be there for his little sister? Ben tied the noose around his neck and kicked the chair out from under him. And as the life left his eyes, he heard Julia's voice, welcoming him. "I never wanted to be married. It wasn't part of my plans. And then I met Xian. Xian was wonderful, kind, and loving. A bookworm and an adventurer, my perfect man. With him, there were no worries, just happiness. Suddenly, I couldn't picture any future without him by my side. And so, when he proposed, my answer was a resounding yes. But life is cruel, and the gods have a twisted sense of humor. 2 weeks before our wedding, I lost Xian in a freak car accident. He never had a chance, and I never got to say goodbye. It was the worst day of my life. That was until I found I was pregnant. In our culture, children born out of wedlock were taken away. The woman and her family were also shunned and humiliated. I didn't want to lose my last connection to my greatest love, but I also couldn't let my family suffer for me. Desperate, I went to Xian's family and begged for their protection. Anya, there is a way that we can protect your child and your family, Xian's father explained. But it will require great sacrifice on your part. Are you willing? For Xian's child, yes, I would do anything. It was a ghost wedding, a tradition that his family practiced for years. In a combination of funeral and wedding rituals, I married Xian and moved into their ancestral home. I wore my wedding dress and said my vows in front of a bamboo effigy. I also took a vow of celibacy, which wasn't really a big deal. I would have my baby and my family would be safe. Physical intimacy was not part of my priorities. I thought my nightmare was over, but it was just beginning. On the first night, as Xian's bride, he came in my dream. I was so happy to see even just a vision of him, but he looked so sad and worried.
Why?
He asked me.
Why did you agree? You should have run, Anya. Run far away from here.
I can't run. I have nowhere else to go. I did this for our child, Xian. Run, Anya, run, and never look back. For months, Xian kept appearing in my dream and saying the same thing. Run. But I didn't listen. I now wish I had. I wish I ran away to the ends of the world and never came back. But I stayed, clinging to the protection of an old family. Our son was born yesterday, and he looked just like Xian. His grandfather took him away, and I was taken into the family's chamber. I finally realized the price for my child's life and my family's safety. They will be okay, but I will never see them in this lifetime again. I guess this was the sacrifice I had to make, to stay here with Xian in their family tomb until death brings us together once more. I can't stand this peer pressure anymore. We are a group of 13 staying in this house, and I am the youngest. The owner of the house keeps on renting it to the humans, who are more of a minor irritation, if you ask me. But the elders are hell-bent on destroying anyone alive living here. I am tired of all the leave my house, scratched to the walls in blood. It's just not my style. The only one who understands me is Jackie. She is nearer to my age and kind of gets my angle. Whenever we are put on scare duty, we just hang around in the dark shadows, whether the humans can see us or not. In my opinion, that's when you can get effective scares. More of a Mike Flanagan approach. But the elders just wouldn't have it. They insist on blood dripping from the ceiling and eyeballs floating in the morning tea. The other day, I had to scream at Matilda for suggesting that I put on a scary nun costume. The teenage boy, who was part of the family staying there at that time, accidentally saw it and fainted. If he had died, he would have been death number 14, and finally I would have someone of my age with us. I'm thinking about taking over things. The house owner brought in an exorcist the other day, and I have half a mind to team up with that man and destroy the elders. It was them who killed my family in the first place. I died in the house and had to join the group, while everyone else survived till they reached the hospital. Or at least I could have had them with me. Father Davidson is staying for the night, and I suppose I can induce him a dream, explaining my plight. There is no way that I am staying another 100 years with these Jesus in this house. Anyway, it's time for me to do my daily chores. I'm on scare duty tonight. I suppose floating parallel to a sleeping woman, with my nose tip almost touching hers, a jollous wide grin and rotting eyeballs, kinda makes my job easy. Do visit us at the Upora Bed and Breakfast. Cheers. Pinewood Drive, a street of my old neighborhood, which intersected with mine a few blocks down. There's a local legend that back in 1983, a 16-year-old girl was walking home from school when she was struck by a car operated by a drunk driver. Her body was thrown 100 feet, and she died on impact. Her ghost is known to roam the neighborhood, but only when it rains. She died during a storm. Though pedestrians are often killed by drunk or erratic drivers, her death held even more potency within our town, because she had just found out she was pregnant 1 week earlier. Legend has it that in fact, she was struck because she had an abortion and was walking home from the clinic. They call it God's wrath. She walks the streets now in limbo, tricking drivers into picking her up and exacting her vengeance against them in various ways. Once I was able to drive, my friends and I, usually drunk, would case the neighborhood in our cars, looking for Selma, the Pinewood ghost. One particular night, just as it began to drizzle, we slowly rolled up on a girl walking on the side of the road in a red coat, but without an umbrella, a telltale sign, since one of her tricks was to lure drivers who seek to get her out of the rain. We crawled alongside her, despite the protesting from myself and our friend Jeff, both in passenger seats. "Aw, damn. It's just Jill," my friend KJ sighed. We rolled down our window. "Jilly Vanilly. Need a ride?" "Ah, yes please." We all were relieved. I moved over so she could sit beside me. After she shut the door and thanked us, we explained who we thought she was. Just then, the rain began to downpour heavily. After telling her about our comical assertion, she stayed silent. Odd for a girl like Jill, who's extremely talkative, sometimes so much that we have to tell her to shut up. But the silence was unlike her. You might be thinking, I know what's about to happen. You picked up the ghost girl instead of Jill. Nope. I looked directly at her face. It was, in fact, Jill. After the conversation about Selma ended, Jill slowly picked up her head and said, "Do you know how Selma tricks drivers into picking her up?" "Yeah," said Jeff. "She walks around without an umbrella, and people feel bad, so they give her a ride." Then, Jill said, "Do you know how else?" We remained silent, waiting for her reply. When she responded, her voice devolved into a sinister, shrill murmur.
"She tricks them by looking like someone they know."
Suddenly the car screeched to a halt, and I noticed terror in KJ's eyes through the rearview mirror, as an evil cackling sounded out of the mouth of the girl sitting next to me. For a split second, I turned to look at a terrifying, disfigured face, gleaming at me with missing teeth and blood running out of her mouth. We all ran out of the car screaming. KJ's car was eventually towed, and the next day at school, Jill told us she'd been home all night. It's been 20 years, and I remain terrified of the rain. When KJ picked up his car at Impound, he found a pacifier in the back seat. I had nearly drifted off when I finally heard the sound I'd been waiting for. I strained my ears once Mel's door clicked back shut, and I listened to the soft thud of her steps coming down the hallway. She tiptoed by my door and began descending the stairs, skipping over the creaky third step. I waited until the porch door opened and closed again before I rose from the bed. The night before, I could have sworn I'd heard her returning home in the early morning hours. Now I was certain. I felt a mix of emotions as I went through the possibilities of what she could be doing. Anger and worry, of course, but also guilt. I'd been so absent lately, lost in my own head, barely going through the motions of being a father to her. Whatever Mel was up to, it was my inattentiveness that must have driven her to it. I pulled my jacket on and slipped into the chilly night air. I could just make out Mel's silhouette up the road, moving swiftly and ducking between shadows. I hurried to catch up, doing my best to avoid crunching the fallen leaves under my feet. I breathed a sigh of relief as I saw her pass right by our neighbor's house with the boy she liked from the high school, but it only made me more nervous about what she could be sneaking around for. As if hearing my thoughts, she suddenly whirled around, and for a second, I thought she had spotted me. She scanned the darkened street, turning her head from side to side. Before she turned back, I was able to see that she was clutching something tightly to her, but what it was, I couldn't tell. She journeyed on, walking further out of the neighborhood and climbing up the hill. My heart dropped as I finally realized where she was heading. I passed the rusted cemetery gates to find her perched on a stone wall, pulling her violin from its case. I stood, frozen in place, as she began to play as softly and slowly. It was eerily beautiful. I hadn't listened to her perform in a long while, and I didn't realize just how masterful she had become. As the song began to build, my breath was taken. Shadows began to take form in the twinkling starlight. All around us, the dead were rising from their graves. I stifled a scream, holding a hand over my mouth and watching as the apparitions began to sway to the music, as if entranced by it. One of the ghosts crept toward me, her arms outstretched, her hair flowing behind her as if she were underwater. Mel glanced up without a pause in her bowing, a smile crossing her face, as she saw her mother wrapped in my arms once more. She rested her head against my chest, and under the light of the moon, we danced. George sat alone in his apartment. He hadn't moved from his armchair for over 5 hours. In his hand, he was holding a picture of his daughter Rose. The glass in the frame was covered in droplets from his tears. It had been 1 month since the accident in which Rose had drowned in a public pool. The lifeguard, Ted Richards, was too busy on his phone to notice a child was drowning. When he did notice, it was too late. She was already dead. You never got justice, Rose. That bastard is still working at the pool, putting more lives at risk, he thought angrily. He reached down beside his chair and grabbed the half-full bottle of whiskey from the floor and proceeded to neck it all. His gaze once again fell on the picture of Rose. He thought of the things he would sacrifice just to see his daughter once more. There was nothing he wouldn't give. George was suddenly broken from his thoughts. His phone was vibrating in his pocket. He looked at the number. It was unknown. He answered, "Hello."
Surprise!
A child's voice replied, excitedly. "Who is this?"
It's Rose, silly.
"Rose, is that really you?" Tears formed in his eyes.
Do you miss me?
"More than anything."
I don't believe you.
Her voice was angry. "What? But why?"
Because he is still alive?
Then she hung up. George dropped the phone onto the floor and sunk his face into his hands and began to cry. She was right. How could he just sit here while the bastard that let his daughter drown still draws breath? He got up from his chair, grabbed his hunting knife, and picked the phone up from the floor, placing it into his pocket. He got into his car and drove off. He parked his car down the road from Ted Richards' house. George approached the window and held his face to the glass. The man who let his daughter drown was sitting watching television. George approached the front door and knocked. As soon as Ted opened the door, George stuck the hunting knife straight into his eye. He felt the eyeball pop as his knife penetrated into Ted's skull. That's for Rose. George fled the scene and drove home. He sat himself down onto his armchair. He felt no remorse for his actions. His daughter deserved justice. Bits of brain matter still clung to the edge of the hunting knife as he cleaned it. The phone vibrated in his pocket.
Thank you, Daddy.
Rose's voice was full of cheer. I will be with you soon, my angel, George said. Tears fell down his face.
Really? Yeah.
The phone cut out and turned to a sound of static. George hung himself that night, his face locked in a smile as he drew his last breath. He and Rose were reunited at last. I sit in darkness on the floor just off the entryway. The grandfather clock says it's 11:09. It'll happen soon, just like last year, like every year. Thunder rumbles. Through the unshuttered windows, the sky is clear. A full moon shines like a spotlight into the spacious fire. 11:10. I look to the door on the opposite side of the hall. Anxiety swells in my chest. The door opens of its own accord. The sound of footsteps and scraping echo against the vaulted ceiling. I can't see anything, but I don't need to. I know who's there. I know what she's doing. I stand up. Mom, I yell. What are you doing? It's 11 at night. That can wait until tomorrow. A voice mumbles, but it's not directed at me. I know the litany well. No one does anything around here. I'm the only one who cares. This place would go to pieces without me. Mom, it isn't safe. The scraping stops, and now I can see the shape of the rickety ladder. After 20 years, it's rotted in some places, shuddering on its uneven feet. Mom, please. Tears stream down my face. I said I'd help you in the morning. Please, just wait. Why won't you wait? The ladder rocks as an invisible force begins to climb. The sound of rain against glass swells as a silhouette reaches the top. Mom, I scream. I'm tempted to run into the foyer, an audience member invading the stage. But I know better. I've tried it before. Mom, please, you're going to get yourself killed. She doesn't listen. She never listens. Or maybe she can't hear. It doesn't matter which. The figure reaches toward the chandelier and mimics unscrewing a light bulb. There's nothing there to grasp, as the light hasn't been replaced since it happened. At the apex of her reach, when the ladder wobbles under her, the thunder booms. The windows rattle, the walls shake, the sound resounds inside my chest. My mother jerks in surprise. The ladder rocks. I don't see the fall. Tears blur everything into shadows and silver, but I hear the impact. I sink to my knees, grief tearing through my throat, spasming through my body. When I can't shed another tear, I collapse onto the floor and wait. Eventually, the light changes. Gold diffuses the silver. Outside, birds trill. Still exhausted, I rise. I wish I could sleep, but I can't. I haven't for a long time. Instead, I walk. Dust lays thick on the carpet, but I leave no footprints. I know every inch of this place. Every goddamn inch. I want to leave. I don't enjoy this pantomime. The guilt tethers me here, cursed to relive my greatest regret over and over. Trapped in a parallel purgatory. If I just let go of the guilt, I'll be free. Or maybe, things will be different next year.
Please subscribe, or the toxic skull will come for you.